everyone. Welcome to your newest episode of the Cosmic Matrix podcast with your hosts, myself, Laura Matsu, and my husband, Bernhard Gunther. And on this episode, we are going to discuss Pluto and Aquarius, a new era in collective evolution. So we're going to be discussing Pluto and Aquarius mainly from an evolutionary astrology perspective. We're going to talk about how Pluto in evolutionary astrology relates to evolution and collective evolution, how evolution exists in two forms, involution and evolution, which is destruction and creation, how Pluto also relates to our collective karma, and how we're all alive during Pluto and Aquarius because we all have collective karma related to these Aquarian themes and what those could be. We're also going to talk about the process that Pluto transits takes us through, meaning what does the shift from Pluto in Capricorn to Aquarius mean for us on different levels, both physically, psychologically, spiritually, how Pluto in Aquarius tends to relate to a struggle against an old worldview and an emerging new one, how this relates to a shift of power. And we're going to discuss how all outer planets, Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus, will be changing signs in 2025, what that could mean, and how this marks a significant change for the world and how that could show up and affect us. So we're going to talk about how this relates to a technological revolution, how this transit relates to things we see happening in the US right now, and how to work with the Aquarius-Leo axis in general. So in evolutionary astrology, we're looking at both sides of a polarity. So the opposite sign of Aquarius is actually Leo, and the point of evolution for Aquarius is actually Leo. So how we find the balance is actually considering the opposite sign of the sign that we're in. So we're going to be discussing that. And in the second hour, we're going to talk about how Pluto and Aquarius relates to the ongoing splitting of humanity, how there's going to be a transfer of power from the bureaucracy to the technocracy and the people, how Bitcoin and crypto may play a part in the decentralization theme that's part of Pluto and Aquarius, the lessons of Prometheus, how he stole fire from the gods, and how this relates to us facing certain karma from Atlantis and transhumanism. And then lastly, in the second hour, we're going to discuss how Pluto transits show up in your life, what to look out for, and then give you some things to think about because we have some personal experience relating to this axis in our own way. Before we get into that, I just want to make a quick announcement. The newest round of Embodied Soul Awakening, our 14-week group program in psycho-spiritual self-work, is now full. As we mentioned on the last podcast, we are going to be taking a break for a little while so that we can focus on another project. If you want to be on the waiting list for when we launch again, you can always go to thetimeoftransition.com and sign up for the waiting list. And we're also going to be launching a new project for people who wants to experience something new. Maybe you've taken the course before. Maybe you want to see what kind of new work we have up our sleeve. So look out for that also in 2025. Okay, so before I get into this, the reason we're talking about, we've been talking about Pluto and Aquarius for a while, like as an evolutionary astrology, I'm obsessed with Pluto, obviously. So we've been already discussing this way ahead of when it kind of reached the consensus. But when Pluto entered Aquarius for good on November 19th, 2024, i.e. it was going retrograde back and forth between Capricorn and Aquarius, basically all of 2023 and a bit of 2024. Even the people in the mainstream were discussing it, and it was very fascinating. And what I noticed is like there was like a very like almost like surface level understanding of Pluto and Aquarius. And the main thing I think I want to point out with Pluto is that Pluto is actually about depth in evolutionary astrology. It's about the soul. So we're going to be really tackling this from a whole different level than a regular astrologer might be tackling this. Just as a preface, I just want to make a note for this because I get a lot of people who are usually not very graceful in their communication talk about astrological true sky and like, okay, but Pluto is not actually in Aquarius right now. Look at the sky, look at the sky. And I just want to address this before we continue. So hopefully this dispels any emails. So I'm a tropical Western astrologer. I think both the Vedic and the Western systems are fascinating. They have value in them. I've just decided to go down this path because evolutionary astrology and tropical Western astrology has helped me so much in my journey that I decided to learn it so I could use it to help others. But I want to count the difference and why this whole true sky astrology doesn't make a difference. So the difference is like similar to this whole true sky, Vedic astrology is based off of constellations and fixed stars, while Western astrology is based off the solstice and the equinoxes, so the seasons. So even though they share the same names, astrological signs are not the same as astronomical constellations. So where the constellations are in the sky are not relevant to Western astrology because it does not view the background of fixed stars as a point of reference from the Earth perspective. So Western astrology uses the same reference point as that of astronomy. It divides the ecliptic into segments starting at the vernal equinox, i.e. it's based on seasons. So, and I think the main thing with astrological systems in general is when people get dogmatic with them, not unlike religion. So there's many ways of looking at a chart, from systems, house systems, techniques. They're all fascinating, but we're going to be going into this from a tropical Western astrology perspective. And if you're into that, and if you find value in it, then you can come along for the ride. Because I think that's just important to touch on, because it's funny because these very fixed views on things are such an Aquarius thing.
It's the irony, no?
Yeah, like
it's a Pluto.
Forming a very fixed opinion and being like, I am absolutely right, and then getting dogmatic about them and stuff is such an Aquarius theme too. And I think maybe this is like part of an ongoing theme that's going to show up in different ways in Pluto and Aquarius. But okay, so let's just talk about Pluto in general as it relates to evolutionary astrology. So Pluto is concerned with evolution and evolutionary astrology, namely collective evolution. So the idea is that the reason that Pluto is affecting us generationally is that you need a bunch of people to move the needle forward in evolution. So with Pluto and Aquarius, this represents the overall energy of where the collective is evolving towards. And evolution, simply put, is basically a process of change. And this process exists in two folds: involution, which is a dissolution or ending of a previous form, and evolution, the transmuting of an existing structure into another form. And this is very important to understand. So you're going to see, as Pluto changes signs, you're going to see the death or ending of a previous way of life, involution, and two, evolution, the transmuting of existing structures into another form. So, and this is what makes actually it difficult for them, because even though we see the process of change in nature every single year, there's many people who are not comfortable with change, with death, with endings. It brings up discomfort in them. So if you think about the metamorphosis of a caterpillar to a butterfly, when the caterpillar is in the cocoon, it's messy, it's chaotic, it's confusing. It doesn't know what's happening. It literally melts into a pile of goo. But on the other side of that metamorphosis, it turns into a butterfly, and it turns into a whole new life and a whole new way of being that it never even knew before. And I think this is kind of the process that often Pluto takes us through, is that it can be messy, chaotic, confusing, especially if you don't like change. But on the other side is going to be something beautiful most of the time. Pluto is also the lord of the underworld. So he represents our soul psychology, our deepest desires, and our deepest unconscious, keyword, security needs. And this is how it relates to the Scorpio archetype. So in evolutionary astrology, Pluto represents our collective soul, our collective karma, the deepest desires we get drawn back towards lifetime after lifetime. These desires draw us towards similar situations because facing them and learning them from them helps us evolve. So that's how it relates to our collective karma. It also relates to our individual karma as well in that same way. So the point I'm trying to make is that we are all alive during Pluto and Aquarius because we have certain karma to work out regarding these Aquarian themes, both as individuals and as a collective. So, and the theme is about to shift. And in this podcast, we're going to discuss those themes and how they might play out for you. So And I want to just touch on this. So since Pluto is the lord of the underworld, he tends to unearth shadows in the areas he represents as well. He makes the darkness conscious. He makes us face difficult truths, both individually and collectively. And this is interesting because what I've noticed, I'm a very Plutonian person. I have Pluto conjunct my sun, square my moon. Regular people tend to shy away from this process that Pluto demands. Like, they don't want to go that deep. They don't want to look into the recesses of their own unconscious and soul. They don't want to look at their shadow. And they don't see that there's actually hidden gold in making the darkness conscious, of uniting the conscious unconscious. And namely, with Pluto and Aquarius, this is going to give us an opportunity for individuation. So anytime you're touched by a Pluto transit, it gives you the opportunity to strip up false layers of who you are, to discover your true nature. And that's why Pluto is also the lord of wealth. So there are great gifts for those brave enough to descend into the depths of their own personal darkness, face their deepest fears, because in order to be reborn, you actually have to make this descent into the underworld, and you have to face these deep fears and really slay the dragon, which is the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. As Joseph Campbell said, that treasure is your true self. So,
well, the hero's journey in itself and Carl Jung's shadow work is in itself a very Plutonian process.
Oh, totally, yeah.
Over cycles and cycles and cycles.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing why Pluto makes people uncomfortable, because the key to being reborn is in the descent into the unconscious, into the underworld, into the shadows. So if you're not willing to do that, like, you're not going to get to this process of evolution and change from death from one form, rebirth into a new form, through spiritual bypassing, through love and light, through pretending. Pluto won't allow you to do that. To be born, actually, it often involves a sacrifice. So you have to give something up to get something. So, and especially the past 4 years, you've already seen people go through this with Pluto and Capricorn in a very material way, because Capricorn is a very physical, material sign. Like, they've had to give up many false parts of themselves, their life, maybe a job, a relationship, something very dear to them, to become more in touch with their true self. So the famous quote, I think it's been said by Carl Jung, Sri Aurobindo, multiple people, no tree can reach to heaven that has not been through hell, describes perfectly the process of Pluto and how it relates to soul evolution. So everyone wants soul evolution and to evolve. It sounds really cool and fun, but it actually involves a descent into the underworld. And when we descend into the underworld, the unconscious, and we rise back up and we come to consciousness again, we actually gain mastery of two worlds. And this is also how we unify the division within ourselves and thus the division in the world. So this is an alchemical process. So what I'm trying to point out is, like, how can we heal this polarized world? We literally did a podcast about this, by the way, is that we need to see that the division we see in the world is just a reflection of the fracturing that happened in the collective soul and our individual souls. And this is going to be a huge theme of this podcast, because when we're talking about transhumanism, where this could go, the technocracy, it's not about just like blaming the bad guys out there. It's about actually looking within, especially about how Pluto and Capricorn affected us, and the fracture that we have within our own soul, and how that could manifest going forward in Pluto and Aquarius.
Yeah, this is thank you so much for sharing all of that, first of all. Very key point to understand. And with evolutionary astrology and the way Pluto works, it ties into the true archetypal journey of the awakening process. Because awakening, again, is not just becoming aware of some information of how you think the world works and exposing the quote-unquote dark cabal and evil out there. Right? No, it is actually a descent into the underworld. And the awakening process is also not this linear road up, as I mentioned this before, towards more light and heaven, like the New Age idea of just love and bliss and there's no evil and we're just going to ascend into 5D. No, it's a necessary descent into the darkness. It relates to the divine law of ascent and descent, which Sri Aurobindo talked about in Integral Yoga. He said, similar to what Carl Jung said, that no one can reach heaven who has not been through hell. This is literally the Plutonian process, because the awakening process is a widening on all levels. It's becoming aware of it all. and transmuting all the darkness within and without. So not just out in the world. The world is just a reflection of our inner process. Like Laura said, the polarization and friction in the world is a mirror of our own polarization, different parts and unconscious darkness we're not aware of, just manifested outside. So it goes both ways. But the purpose of the descent of Pluto is also in order to clear everything in the unconscious, what we have repressed, suppressed, avoided, to clear all of that, transmute it. Hence, we can rise to a higher level of being. That's really, also the journey of the archetypal phoenix, right?
Yes.
To be reborn out of the ashes, but we need to. It is a death, rebirth process, and as Laura also mentioned, a lot of people are avoiding it, are afraid of it, and then get stuck, actually. When people tell us, or maybe you see it in your life, sometimes we're stuck in this, it keeps repeating. We are avoiding, mostly on an unconscious level, a necessary death rebirth process of letting ourselves, and the ego likes to hold on to it. Then the ego is very attached to certain views, to a certain way of how the awakening should be, attached to the comfort zone, or the ultimate matrix trap is the victim blame trap. And we then blame everything in the outside world for our misery. And we see this also, unfortunately, more and more in the truther movement with this concept of being black-pilled, where you completely externalize all evil and do not face the darkness within yourself.
Yeah. And I think the fundamental thing is that in this era of humanity, we've lost connection to our bodies, our souls, and therefore a connection to spirit. And all of this has created a spiritual vacuum. And in the presence of that vacuum, we have just externalization, more technology, more information, more head-centric stuff, which is taking us away from ourselves. And I think if we accelerate this in Pluto and Aquarius, which we'll really discuss in the second hour, and we'll touch on the first hour, this is where things will start to go, quote unquote, wrong or awry. Exactly.
And then, interestingly, this term spiritual vacuum, Rudolf Steiner mentioned that already over 100 years ago, that in modern times there's a spiritual vacuum. People have no relationship to the divine, or they're completely lost either in atheism, materialism, or dogmatic religions, which are also distortions of true spirituality. And this spiritual vacuum also creates entry points for the spirits of darkness to come in. The Ahrimanic, Zoratic beings, archons, the called hostile forces, as Sri Aurobindo talked about. And we'll go more into that topic specifically from a hyperdimensional perspective in the second hour.
Yeah, so Pluto is basically going to demand that we face our collective karma regarding Aquarian themes. So the themes that are going to come up have to do with technological innovation, scientific discoveries, individuation, liberating ourselves from previous conditioning. Different communities and subcultures are going to form. Aquarius also holds themes of the god Prometheus, a sense of stealing fire from the gods, meaning like what happens when we get this advanced technology, what effect will it have on humanity. It also can inspire radicalism, extremism, psychological fracturing, anarchy, rebellion, utopian ideals. So whatever is going on, or however this manifests, Pluto and Aquarius is concerned with evolving us towards the future. So ultimately, it is about finding ways that we can improve humanity through maybe different technological innovations, scientific discoveries. But if you look across history, when groundbreaking scientific discoveries come out, a lot of people freak out. And I think that's what we're going to see, is we're going to see the kind of insanity part of Pluto and Aquarius when these technological innovations come out. People will freak out. Some people will embrace them. And this is kind of the ultimate paradox, is technology going to hurt or help us with Pluto and Aquarius? There's also going to be different changes involving astrology, metaphysics, outer space, alternate realities. So it will stretch the boundaries of what we understand to be real. We're going to touch on the second hour about how Pluto and Aquarius relates to our collective Atlantean karma, which is a legendary advanced civilization that also ended up destroying itself very quickly. So let's just talk about this shift from Pluto and Capricorn to Aquarius and just go over this quickly. So number one, Pluto and Capricorn, which started in 2008, we saw accelerated evolution happening in regards to man-made structures. So institutions, laws, systems, social and political structures, authorities, organizations, politics. So we began a process of transforming these existing institutions and exposing the shadows in them, especially in the government and elite. So when Pluto and Capricorn began in 2008, I remember it very clearly because I remember when the recession got announced, it was like I was just off in my own kind of little world. But we began this with recession. And then in response to this recession, we had this Occupy Wall Street movement in 2011, I think it was. And that began as a response to just the distrust that was rising in these public institutions. So we also saw the rise of Me Too, which exposed abuse in the entertainment industry. We also saw the arrest of Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and near the end, we saw the arrest of P. Diddy. So all of these, people kind of belong to the mainstream system, right? We also saw the rise of public distrust in many institutions that many have come to rely on, like legacy media, government, public health, education, the mainstream medical system. All of these events that happened, especially in the past 5 years with COVID, left people really questioning the legitimacy of many of these institutions. So that was Pluto and Capricorn at work. What's interesting, too, is this term deep state, deep meaning Pluto and state being assigned to Capricorn. This is a very Pluto and Capricorn term. This idea of the deep state was exposed. And we realized that there's a lot of unelected bureaucrats who are benefiting off the political system and rigging it in their own personal favor. So we saw all of this corruption being exposed. And now we're kind of left with where do we go from here? What are we going to do with these systems, right? But this process, I really want to know, because I think sometimes people look at things very they only look at Pluto and Aquarius, but they don't see it in the whole cycle, because the process that happened in Pluto and Capricorn is going to continue in Pluto and Aquarius. So with Pluto and Capricorn, we saw the exposing of the corruption in these institutions, the exposing of the deep state, but it's Pluto and Aquarius's job to finish the job and uproot it, transform it to a new system, whatever needs to happen. So we saw the involution, the destruction of the old order, and then we have the evolution, the transmuting of the new of it into a new form. Does it make sense?
Yes, absolutely. I was also thinking the past 18 years, Pluto was in Capricorn, right? From 2008 until now.
15
years is full on Capricorn themes. So this whole, again, just real quick on the true sky idea doesn't even make sense when you just look at it practically of what Capricorn stands for and the areas it manifests in. And that was all full on Pluto and Capricorn over the past 15 years.
Yeah. So we're only continuing. So Capricorn is a cardinal sign. So there's 3 different modes: cardinal, fixed, and mutable, right? So we're just moving from cardinal into Aquarius fixed. So this means that we're only continuing a process of evolution that started in Capricorn. So this is not Aquarius is just going to build off of things that already started 2008 until now, basically. So we need to keep that in mind, that this is not just all of a sudden everything's just brand new, even though there's going to be a big collective shift. It's going to build off of something that came before. So psychologically and spiritually, and this is the area that interests me a lot with Pluto and Capricorn, because in evolutionary astrology, Pluto and Cap also has to do with wounds around repression, suppression, and depression. So Pluto and Capricorn can bring very emotionally heavy events where too much happens too fast, and we have to suppress some emotions in order to survive. And with Cancer, whose ruling planet is the moon opposing Capricorn, these events can be really hard on us emotionally. So a lot of us are struggling to process the immense grief we're carrying from losing people we love, to losing the world we once knew, to even just the intensity of the past 5 years and the division, and even the depth of the shadows that we saw being exposed can make people very depressed and angry, and they'll suppress that in order to survive. So we need to look at how was what happened in Pluto in Capricorn moving into Pluto and Aquarius. So like if we move into Pluto and Aquarius without processing the grief and the emotional weight that we're carrying from what happened in Pluto and Capricorn, what's going to happen when we transfer into Pluto and Aquarius, it's going to turn into cold, unemotional detachment, which is the shadow side of Aquarius. It turns into what you call being black-pilled, right? Which people have argued with me about what black-pilled mean, but when I refer to it, it means a very depressed and negative orientation. And why do you end up depressed and very negative? Because you're carrying something heavy in your body and you're just projecting that externally.
And you will see that in the world through
Yes.
your own level of consciousness. When you're stuck in that, dissociated from your body, from your soul, from your emotions, you're naturally negatively oriented. You see more negativity, you
Yes.
see more doom and gloom. You're more gravitating naturally also to all kinds of psyops, conspiracies that will feed and justify your negative worldview.
Exactly.
It's unconscious.
And you'll be, exactly. So the darkness you're attracted to out there is a reflection of the darkness you're carrying in with you. And I think the most important thing is if you are feeling very depressed, negatively orientating, constantly criticizing yourself or others, just take a moment and think, what am I emotionally carrying that needs to be felt and processed? And I do this in my own life. I even gone through, by the way, I'm not like pointing the finger out there. I've gone through my own periods of depression, especially in 2021, 2022. I was talking to a lot of people who lost family members in a short period, and it was like extremely depressing. And I noticed myself getting into depression. And how did I notice that? Because I was in a pattern of negative thinking. And I also felt heavy and very uninspired and just very disconnected from my own heart. So I took some time to just process that. So we each have our own work to do in that, because if these unprocessed emotions carry over into Pluto and Aquarius, it turns into disassociation from the body, the soul, emotions, and being dissociated and out of body leaves us ripe for some sort of transhumanist takeover.
Exactly.
So as we become more cold and machine-like ourselves, cut off from our souls, stuck in our head, we are more primed for transhumanism and merging with machines. And we're actually almost like enacting the transhumanist agenda and without any technology.
Exactly. So we go deep on this in the second hour, because I want to talk about the spirits of transhumanism from a hyperdimensional perspective. And the entry point is the dissociated, overly detached state of being where something else literally can come in.
Yes.
And that's the irony. A lot of people who are so afraid of transhumanism are blackpilled and point out that, oh my God, Trump and Elon Musk are ushering us into this digitized technocratic takeover. You, by your whole level of being, your disassociation, cut off from your own emotions, what you really never processed, and as you shadow project externally, lay the ground for this potential transhumanist takeover.
Exactly.
It's literally self-fulfilling prophecy. They create their desired reality, these hyperdimensional forces, through you, because they also feed you with these thought injections to keep you blackpilled and suppressed.
And you're disempowering yourself.
Yes.
That's the main thing, is you're saying, I am the way I am. The world is effed, which is a sense of futility that actually Pluto and Capricorn is known for. And then you're giving all your power away to these technocrats rather than regaining power to the people. Okay, so let's just talk about a more conscious way of handling what happened in Pluto and Capricorn. So now I'm talking about Capricorn and Cancer, the polarity and the evolution. So the grief of COVID, Pluto and Capricorn, for many brought up deep wounds from childhood, Cancer. I don't feel safe. I don't belong. No one loves me. People hate me. Whatever they are, right? These core wounds addressed directly give us an opportunity to not only heal places where we still outsource our power to external authorities, but it also teaches us to trust our own inner authority instead. So what happens is if you have unwound, unhealed wounds from childhood manifest as unhealed wounds towards authority in adulthood. So one of the ways this will manifest is overly trusting authority or completely rejecting all authority and just like, I'm just going to be off on my own and do my own thing and F society, right?
F you, I won't do what you tell me.
It's called a Pluto complex, right? Either like, I'm just screw society, it's all a psyop, it's all whatever, it's all like crap, or it's like becoming overly authoritarian. So the whole point of Pluto and Capricorn is to process the emotions so that we can trust ourselves to make the right decisions in life, guided by our inner guidance rather than completely rejecting authority or completely embracing it. So we want to be able to trust this inner authority rather than just following what the experts tell us what to do or completely rebelling against it, by the way, which is also a pathological form of individuation. So when we don't allow what happened in Pluto and Capricorn to either harden us emotionally, make us depressed, or leaves us with a sense of futility, like what's the use? The world is shit, basically kind of mindset. We need to stay connected to our feelings and souls, and then we can use the opportunity. We can use Pluto and Aquarius for individuation. So this means moving from Pluto and Capricorn to Aquarius. We want to process the emotional trauma of what happened in the past 15 years or 5 years. But then also we can use our feelings of alienation from the current culture. We can use the death of the old world to also find out what is unique about ourselves and create the world that we want to live in. So we're building the new world ourselves using our individuation and our creative actualization. And by the way, individuation doesn't just mean being a rebel and like having very different views from society. That's like a pathological form of individuation where you're externalizing everything. It means uniting the conscious and unconscious, which means shadow work, looking at your projections, becoming curious about your inner world, the disowned parts of yourself, so that you can strip off the false layers of who you are and find your true self. So individuation means diving into the depths of your soul. It's not something you find externally through information, through joining a group, through listening to a certain person and what they're going to say is going to happen. You uncover it through diving into the depths of your own soul. So with Pluto and Aquarius, the old world is dying as the new world struggles to be reborn. And this presents an opportunity for those individuated souls, Aquarius, to use their creativity, Leo polarity, to help forge a new vision into the future. So Pluto and Aquarius will represent a struggle against the old worldview and the new one that's emerging, which is why a lot of rebellions happened during this period historically, like the French Revolution, American Revolution, and Civil War. So the question is will there be similar revolutions happening during this transition? Will there be some sort of civil war as the U.S. still remains to be incredibly polarized politically? Again, the polarization that started in Pluto and Capricorn is only going to continue into Aquarius, and that remains yet to be seen because this is not going to resolve overnight. It's going to continue. And I think what we're going to see is that another Aquarius theme is the splitting off of different fringe groups and subcultures that go outside the norm. So what's going to happen is Aquarius and this new world evolves, or this new vision of a new world evolves, there's going to be groups of people who really don't like technology or where society is headed, and they're going to form their different little split-off subcultures and alternative communities. So I think what's going to happen, the left, for example, with the left in the U.S., for example, they're losing power. And I think this is going to also happen with people who reject the technological revolution as well and will refuse to take part in it. So you're going to see people on the left, like especially people who go along with this whole like woke ideology, they're just going to split off and form their own subculture. And the same with people who are very anti-technology. They're going to be like, I'm carrying cash only. I'm not going to take part in it. I'm just going to live in my own little kind of subculture. But they're going to have to split off from society in order to exist.
Yeah, so these ties into psychological splitting in the sense, right? Two extremes, views which is neither is the quote-unquote integrated solution, neither rejecting technology nor making yourself depend on. And we talk about more of that in the second hour as well. But there's just a lot of opportunity in the positive sense as well. But as Laura said, it must come from, we need to integrate the Leo polar opposite characteristics of the heart, right? Of embodiment, of joy, of like activating the joy of the inner child, our creativity, all of that, activating our own inner technology. And as long as we're connected to that, our true self, our essence through the inner work, then we can use outer quote unquote technology in a more conscious way that will benefit all of us in amazing ways.
Yeah, like even, for example, there's already been all sorts of technological revolutions with AI, ChatGPT, even look at like our iPhone, right? Like you can like literally listen to a YouTube about like a certain historical topic on 2 times the speed, right? And like, but the question is are you really understanding it? Like for me, I just went back to focusing on, even though I have an ebook of it, I'm reading a physical book, and like the experience is so much different, right? Instead of like using spell check and ChatGPT to like write your text for you, how about you write it yourself and then edit it yourself? Like this is the kind of thing, because when you don't, you actually degrade your own intellectual capacities. And I think this is the main thing that we're already struggling with, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about Pluto. Well, number one, I just want to touch on one thing too. So ultimately, Pluto in Aquarius is about the power shifting to groups of people rather than one centralized leader. So, and groups of people depend on the individuals within it. So we need to make sure not to externalize our power to either some external savior or some external bad guy, like, oh my God, this one evil technocrat has control over us, or this one politician is going to save the world. It's not going to be like that. It's going to be about groups of people. It's going to be about we, the people, learning to save ourselves. And that's going to be a huge part of it. Because I see a lot of people talk about, oh my God, the technocracy, Elon Musk, blah, blah, blah. I'm not saying that I like 100% support Elon Musk or anything. All I'm saying is you're still outsourcing your power to one centralized leader. And that's going to shift. And you can even see that in the Trump administration. It's actually no longer just about Trump. Look at his whole team. Look at this whole group of people, which is very Aquarian, that's come forward. You can agree with them or disagree with them. It doesn't matter, but it's no longer become just about Trump. It's become about his whole team, which is very Aquarian.
Decentralization is this Aquarian theme as well, which we also see in Bitcoin, the financial system, and all of that.
So now we're going to discuss, what does this mean that all the outer planets are also going to be changing signs in 2025? So this is going to be a huge collective shift. Not only do we have Pluto in Aquarius now for good for 20 years, but we also have Uranus entering Gemini July 2025, where we'll stay until 2033. And Neptune will enter Aries on March 30th, 2025, where we'll stay until 2039. So this period around spring to summer next year, there's going to be a huge shift. So let's just go into Neptune first. So Neptune is a collective dream, what we idealize. It's also what can confuse us, deceive us, where we can experience disillusionment. It also shows up in the art and music of the time. So when Neptune being in Pisces since 2011, we've all been under a bit of a Neptunian fog, and it's been hard to tell what's real anymore because there's been a dissolving of boundaries, of old structures, and for others, a genuine spiritual awakening. You know how many people I've talked to, including myself, who went through a huge spiritual awakening around 2011, 2012, when Neptune was really entering Pisces? That's very fascinating. So, and another point I won't touch on this like in depth, by the way, because we'll maybe touch on this later in 2025, but Neptune also involves a collective dream centered around compassion. And isn't it interesting how a lot of these woke ideologies, where we idealize and put the oppressed and minorities to the forefront, came to popularity, especially in 2011, because Pisces also rules minorities. So in my view, a lot of this whole Neptune in Pisces and this whole woke ideology where we're worshiping the oppressed, we're worshiping the victims, is so Neptune in Pisces. And isn't it interesting? I don't know if you saw, but today, like a bunch of major corporations, including Walmart, are canceling their DEI program. So as we near the end of Neptune and Pisces, we're seeing the dissolution of a lot of these ideologies centered around the oppressed, centered around the minorities near the end. So fascinating.
Yeah.
So we're seeing this collective mood shift when Neptune enters Aries. And Aries, being the first sign of the zodiac, will feel like a new beginning. The ideals will be more centered around the individual. It may involve fighting for ideals. Historically, it does relate to wars and civil wars. And Neptune in Aries will also sextile Aquarius. So I wonder if the collective hopes and dreams that we have for the future, Pluto and Aquarius, will be something that we believe is worthy of fighting wars over, which is the kind of connection to Neptune in Aries. And then looking at the art of the time, isn't it interesting as a kind of almost premonition of what's to come? We have this big Gladiator 2 movie as Neptune is about to enter into Aries. So the Aries being the sign of the warrior.
So it's interesting with Neptune Aries. I think we touched upon this briefly on the previous podcast as well, but we can also get into quote unquote holy wars, wars over belief systems, religious wars, or even also a sign of a spiritual war, which we're also in with other forces interacting with humanity.
Yeah. So I think with Neptune in Aries, we are being caught, we could get caught in like a battle over ideologies. We may feel more inspired to fight over individual rights rather than the rights just for the most victimized and oppressed, which we saw in Neptune and Pisces. So, there's a good and bad side of it too. Neptune in Pisces was a time of disillusionment and confusion. This is why, it's all of these, it's hard to tell what's real anymore as we reach the final degrees of Neptune and Pisces. We've been in this extreme fog, right? But when Neptune enters Aries, it will feel like a new sense of clarity. And Aries wants independence. It's courageous and it's willing to fight for it. So I think there's going to be a fight for independence, which will play out all over the world. And America, we're going to see these themes play out in its own way. And I do think we're going to see a kind of second American revolution that may also inspire rebellions and uprisings from those who resist the incoming changes. It likely will not look like the first one. Because number one, we're in a whole different level of consciousness. We're in a whole different era, but we're going to see similar archetypal themes of something fundamentally is going to change and it will inspire people to uprise and rebel against those existing changes. What's also interesting is that Aquarius also relates to both anarchy and socialism and communism. And I think this people splitting off into different groups will support both camps. So we're going to see people splitting off into anarchist groups, communist groups, and perhaps even fighting for that with Neptune and Aries become the dominant worldview. And with Pluto and Aquarius too, they're going to become very fixed and rigid about it as a shadow side. But ultimately, Neptune and Aries is a time to be courageous. It's a time for the pioneers. Neptune and Aries wants us to fight to make the world that we idealize into reality, whatever that vision we hold is. So it will be a very invigorating time. And I think things will get very interesting in the beginning, the first half of 2025, when we see that shift. We're going to feel whoa, stuff is happening. And so let's move into Uranus and Gemini. So that's going to happen July 2025 to 2033. Uranus in Gemini is going to bring sudden breakthroughs in areas involving communication, computers, travel, including space travel, technology. So all of these advances we see in Pluto and Aquarius will affect the way we connect with one another with Uranus and Gemini. So we're going to see the rise of more self-driving cars, smart cities, AI, robots. So the world around us will be drastically changed as Pluto in Aquarius trines Uranus in Gemini. So I think we're going to see also the continued evolution of education and how we learn online. So Gemini represents how we connect and communicate with one another and our everyday lives. So all of these areas are going to be completely transformed through the technological revolution in Pluto and Aquarius. So just imagine the kind of VR, AI technology that's going to drastically change our everyday lives. I don't know if people remember this, but there was a cartoon called The Jetsons. Remember that?
I remember, yeah.
That's the kind of I honestly think it's going to get crazy. And also Aquarius rules outer space and Gemini rules travel. So obviously outer space travel will accelerate. We're going to see the dawning of a new technological revolution. So the rise of AI, transhumanism, robotics, blockchain, virtual reality, quantum computing. And this kind of leads into our second hour. But the real question is, are we going to develop inner technology or we become dependent on outer technology?
Yeah, I want to just comment on that real quick. Thank you so much for laying all these new, like a lot of outer planets are changing signs, right?
Yes.
Over the next few years is huge.
All of them, yeah.
But what I really like, especially about evolutionary astrology, the way you described it, you get like a bird's eye view and it makes things more impersonal. You understand there are much bigger cycles at work that is not one person doing anything to us. Everybody plays their roles. I see this, even people get too hung on what Elon Musk is doing or Trump or even the Truth Movement. They're moving us into a technocratic nightmare and digital enslavement and all of that. And yes, there's a shadow side to all of that, but every person plays a very important evolutionary role. Even Musk completely ties into Pluto and Aquarius or Uranus and Gemini and plays his part. We are all transducers of these higher energies. We all have our mixed bag of quote-unquote negative and positive forces. So absolute evil doesn't even exist. But if you see this in the context of the evolution of consciousness, everything is happening exactly as it needs to happen and couldn't be any other way.
Yeah.
And within it, there are other lessons, right? Like, let's talk about that, right? Ultimately, is also, beyond the outer technology, is the lessons to learn or connect to our quote-unquote inner technology and raise our levels of consciousness.
I mean, I think this kind of speaks to this fundamental, almost archetypal battle of like man and machine that's been happening ever since the industrial evolution. It probably happened ever since the dawning of the age of time, right? Where there can be new advancements in technology and people fear it. Like, they project the devil onto it. Like, can you imagine when cars and planes first come out, how much people are going to freak out? I think this is going to be the same. Like, even with myself, like, it was very interesting. Right after Pluto entered Aquarius, this Tesla robot, or what is it? This robot that
Tesla, yeah,
it's a Tesla robot, right? Kim Kardashian like posted a video of her with her new Tesla robot, right? Literally the day after Pluto entered Aquarius, and it was so funny. And I was even thinking in the back of my head, I was like, like I would be totally open to getting one. Do my laundry. I hate folding my laundry. It's so annoying. Just do the annoying everyday home tasks that I don't want to do. But even in the back of my head, I was like, okay, but will it kill me? Does it know how to does it have sentience? Like, I think this is almost a fundamental part of being human, right? And I think this is going to be something that we're going to battle for the next 20 years. And I mean, in my opinion, the answer is actually within our own souls, meaning we need to anchor into our own souls, because no matter how technologically advanced society becomes, is really the disconnection from our own souls, which is the problem, in my opinion. And the real question is like, even visiting these other planets, I think it could be very disappointing unless we accept the spiritual domains of reality and get out of this materialistic worldview. I.e., if you visit Mars and there is like Mars civilizations, they could be existing on a completely different plane of consciousness that people who visit there may not have access for. So I think this is the main thing, is like, the real question is, I think people are going to be asking themselves is, will this technology evolve into some technocratic dystopian nightmare? Or will this really be a dawning of a new golden age? It really depends on our collective and our own level of consciousness, and also this karma we have from Atlantis, which we're going to talk about more from the second hour. So let's relate all of this to what's happening now. So there are already sweeping changes being announced. I'm going to talk about it from an American perspective because that's where I live right now, but I am aware that Canada, where I'm from, is also going through profound changes, and the rest of the world. But America, Trump wants to make sweeping changes to existing systems. So number one, he wants to change the whole taxation system to one of tariffs, which is freaking people out, by the way, because
they misunderstand it too.
I'm on leftist Twitter, and because I have two different Twitter accounts. One, I'm just my regular account, and then the other one, I just like the most deranged leftist posts so I can stay in the loop with what's going on. And they're just freaking out over it. And again, this represents this struggle against an old worldview and a new possibility, right? This fear of change. Everyone seems to like on the left paying taxes all of a sudden.
Yeah.
We also have DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, which promises to cut a lot of useless government jobs and spending. People also freaking out about that. Like, and it's funny because like whole Pluto and Capricorn was like, screw the government and like, let's get rid of the government. And then Elon and Vivek come in and they want to get rid of the government and now they don't like it.
But that ties also into the aspect of Pluto and Aquarius you mentioned before. Decentralization is happening even within the government.
That's a good
to
point.
A point, right? You can debate, on the details, and it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
But he's taken away the power from just federal centralized agencies and give it more to the people or more to the states, right? Ironically, even the whole abortion Roe versus Wade debate, all what Trump did is federal government has no right to say over it, give it over to the states. More decentralized, more power to the people, actually, ironically, right? Not some draconian centralized government agency proclaiming the law for all.
So, and then just to touch on, RFK Jr. is going to be the lead of the Department of Health and Human Services, and Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, he is going to be the NIH director and also working with RFK. And by the way, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, he was one of the people in the Twitter files who was shown that he was being blacklisted, actually, meaning that you couldn't search for him, you couldn't find his stuff.
It's amazing.
And now he's literally going to be the leader of the Department of NIH, and he was very critical against lockdowns and the COVID response. So isn't it interesting how the people who got canceled are now being put in positions of power?
Couldn't be more Pluto than Aquarius.
It is. It's like the rise of the Aquarians. Like, RFK Jr. isn't like specifically Aquarian, but he has strong Uranus signatures in his chart. So many of these things, many of these new changes will just be upsetting to the established order. And I think will inspire people to, one, leave the country, because Pluto and Aquarius is also related to mass migrations of people, or rebel and form their own split off groups. So I think that's what's going to happen. And this is all related, again, to what I spoke about earlier. How do we relate to change? And is all change good? I'm not saying that every single thing the Trump administration is going to do, I'm going to be on board with. I'm more in the camp and like, we'll see. This sounds good, but let's see how much can happen. And I'm also not going to expect perfection from them either, because I know how deeply rooted these systems are. And I think it's going to be very hard to basically drain the swamp.
Yeah, and also it relates tightly related to the level of consciousness of humanity.
Yes.
So our inner work or whatever, or lack thereof, is also reflected in the world. Mm-hmm. That's literally what it comes down to, right? So too many people externalize everything again.
Yeah.
But mass migration also, Pluto and Aquarius, another theme, ties into mass deportation. As well.
That's a good point, actually.
Right?
That's a good point. Yeah.
Trump wants to do.
Yeah. I mean, I think with the Saturn-Pluto transit that we talked about, I think it was on the last podcast, right? This also relates to strengthening of borders. I could be mistaken, but I also think it could relate to Pluto and Aquarius. But the strengthening of borders is going to be an ongoing theme. And then on a psycho-spiritual level, Pluto and Aquarius could bring a sense of fragmentation, splitting, a feeling of loss of hopes and ideals in the collective as we go through these changes. It can even bring masses of people cycling into insanity and types of mental illness because they're afraid of the future. They're afraid of how radically things are going to change. I think we're going to see a lot of people really lose it. And I'm not just talking about one political camp. I'm saying across the spectrum, because again, most people are not comfortable with death and change. And I'm not saying that all change is good. I'm just saying that a lot of people are uncomfortable with this. So if you change existing systems that people have come to rely on unconsciously for security, even paying taxes, you would be surprised how many people have an unconscious security need to pay taxes to be in this system, right? So I think we're going to see all sorts of people reject these changes happening, and even reject the technological evolution as well, and then cast themselves out of society because of it, because this Aquarius archetype is also associated with alienation.
Based on a complete knee-jerk reaction, basically.
Yeah, and that's like an unhealthy like aspect of this process. So lastly, before we get into the second hour and we really dive deep in this whole transhumanist Atlantis karma, which is, in my view, is something that, well, not in my view, in my research, is something that no one has ever touched. It may seem far out there to people, but I think this is the underlying thing. I think that this is a really important thing to pay attention to, because as far as the collective karma we're about to face, I think it relates to Atlantean karma, and Bernhard has a lot to share about that. But let's just talk on a practical level. How can we work with this Aquarius and Leo axis? What are the themes? How can it show up in our lives? What do we need to aim towards? So number one, Pluto transits are going to affect everyone differently, for starters. What I'm saying will not relate to everyone, but especially if you have planets in Aquarius, Leo, Scorpio, or Taurus, please pay attention, because you are going to get affected by this in a very personal way.
Yes.
Other planets will be transited, other people will be transited, but they're going to get squares, oppositions, and conjunctions. And I know, because I've had an opposition and square to my sun and moon through Pluto transit, and like it's been really intense, but really fruitful time in my life. So Pluto in Aquarius really wants us to become true individuals through breaking free of the conditioning of society. This means breaking free of both society's conditioning and our ancestral, our familial conditioning. So this is why it's known for people being a little bit ahead of their time, a little bit different. So we want to find ways that we can embrace our individuality in such a way that we can break free of what society projects on you or holds you back. And this is different from completely rejecting society, but it's being more discerning with the influences. So like even with COVID, right? Like you had the government, you had your job, you had your family telling you to do something, telling you to live some sort of way, right? That went against maybe your own values, what you really believed. And I feel like a lot of people already started this process through the past 4 years of realizing like, wow, my family doesn't have the same values as me. The society doesn't have the same values of me. If I just listen to what my family and society tells me to do, I'm going to lose myself in the process. So this kind of is a beginning seed of individuation where you start to question, like, where did I get my values from? Where did I get these beliefs from? Do they relate to who I really am as a person? And you're really meant to strip off of all these false beliefs so that you can recover yourself as you really are as a true individual. So it's not also completely rejecting society. Like, I'm just going to live in a split off fringe group. It's being more discerning with the influences. So you're not just throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because one of the common things I see with people, especially those people who felt persecuted or alienated from the past 4 years or 5 years and completely disheartened by what happened, they can shut themselves out completely from society in response to those wounds. And rejecting everything in the world is not true liberation. That's just you throwing out with the baby with the bathwater.
You're actually in a very lower state of consciousness, going back to David Hawkins' work based on the map of consciousness, you're in apathy.
Yes.
Right, which is extreme, also self-victimization, underlying self-hatred, and unprocessed negative emotions.
Yeah.
And it goes back what you mentioned before, to really process the grief, the sadness, and all of that to rise to a high level of consciousness.
Yeah. And also, the main thing is that even with looking at your ancestral conditioning, society's conditioning, right? It's not just saying, oh, just because society or the consensus or my family believes this, I'm going to reject it, right? Just because people like this movie or people have this value or whatever, I'm not going to go watch this movie because it's popular.
Everybody likes it.
I'm not going to watch Gladiator 2 because it's popular. That's kind of like this, or I'm not going to listen to this podcast because it's popular. That's a very pathological form of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right? And I think that's kind of the main thing, is you need to just be discerning. And you can only do this through an internal process, actually. You can't do this just through your mind alone. You really have to go within and decide which values relate to my own true nature, which don't, which am I just, how am I just going along with the program against the needs of my own soul? And that's an inner process. So if you don't free yourself from this conditioning you received, what can usually happen is you become alienated and dissociated even from your own soul. So we need to look back at places where we may be held back. We felt held back from society. We felt held back in our lives because of what our family expected of us, and do inner work to heal that trauma so we can uncover who we really are. And this means returning to the heart again. It means returning to your soul. It means healing your soul. So the biggest trauma that can happen with people is they can become extremely dissociated because they feel different from the group. And then they end up living in this very cold, unemotional, head-centric existence where they're very cut off from society. That's shadow Aquarius. So it's returning, it's going from the heart back in, it's going from the head back into the heart. So finding self-love, finding a connection to your feelings and body again, so that you have the courage to lead from the heart and not the head. And, how do you know you have a connection to your heart? Do you feel playful? Do you feel optimistic? Do you feel creative? Do you have fun?
Joy.
Do you have joy? That's a huge one, right? Do you feel like you can create your own destiny? You can self-actualize your life using your own form of inspiration where your heart leads you to. So this is really about anchoring that light within the heart, which is a type of spiritual awakening, which is a type of returning the self into the core of the soul and letting that shine, not being afraid to be yourself, and then attracting people who want to be part of this. This is very different from this cold intellectual detachment and a feeling of being alienated from society. It's you returning into society as your true self, but not feeling like you're controlled by society and by culture. Mm-hmm. So it's like rising out of this NPC consciousness, basically, of like, you know what? Like there's an NPC consciousness in every single mass movement, which doesn't allow for individual thought, right?
Including the truth movement.
Yeah, you can join a group and then you're like, this is what I believe, and this is what the group believes, and this is what the leader in the group believes. That's nothing to do with you as an individual, right? So we're looking at creative self-actualization and individuation. It's not about collecting more info, more data, finding a new leader to tell you what to believe. It's about you looking within, healing any dissociation that happened over the past 15 years and beyond, healing trauma so you can find a way that you can live a soulful, loving, heart-centered life again. And this is the greatest protection against some sort of transhumanist takeover, by the way, because if we embody our souls, our unique essence, and we're creatively actualizing our lives as we see fit, we create the world we want to live in.
Yes, exactly. Beautifully said. The only way out is in and through. And soul embodiment is the antidote to everything, because then you align yourself more, your true self of divine will, and that will have effect on the external world as within, so without.
Yes.
As long as you externalize everything. You can check yourself. For me, also going back to the definition of black pill is somebody who's extremely externally oriented, only on an informational 3D level.
And depressed.
And mostly negative oriented.
Yes.
And in a negative state of mind with depression underlying he or she may not be even consciously aware of, because they project their pain externally onto the evildoers.
And if you see things only negatively, you're cut off from your heart. Like, look at how seeing things negatively affects your relationship to yourself, to others, right? Like, you have to be able to look at that impact. So
it's a lower state of consciousness. I'm sorry, that's really what it comes down to. And I've been through this myself.
I know. I've watched you go through that journey, actually. I mean, I think, we all have our different places where we tend to be very negative and black-pilled. Aquarius is known for loving humanity, but not individual humans, not so much, right? Yes. But I think this is going to be an ongoing thing. And basically what I'm saying is that this cold intellectual detachment, this feeling of being alienated to the point of shutting yourself off from society, in order to heal this, we need to look within, find a way to our most loving part of ourselves so that we can create the world that we want to live in, rather than thinking that it's all happening to us. So it's an empowering perspective. So
excellent.
In the second hour, we're going to talk about, number one, this ongoing splitting of humanity, Pluto and the transfer of power from the bureaucracy to the technocracy and power to the people. We're going to discuss a few public figures in the mainstream who have dominant Aquarius planets. We're going to talk about Bitcoin. Bitcoin's probably going to be a big player if we look at the astrology for that. And mainly, the main thing we're going to touch on is Pluto and Aquarius and how it relates to the themes of Prometheus, which is the myth about stealing fire from the gods, and how Prometheus suffered greatly for it and what the lesson in it for it. And most of all, we're going to talk about Atlantis and Aquarius and how this relates to certain past lives we have as a collective. So there's certain souls who are going to be incarnating during Pluto and Aquarius and who are alive, who are not Pluto and Aquarius. Like we have Pluto in Libra, Pluto in Scorpio, Pluto in Sagittarius. All of us have a connection to this Atlantean karma that's coming up. And then how this relates to also transhumanism as well. And we'll also talk about our own experiences with the Leo Aquarius axis, and then give you a few more tips on how evolution through Pluto can show up in your life and what you need to look for.
Excellent. So if you're not a member yet, to get access for this second hour and also support us, support the podcast. As you know, we don't have any advertisement, no sponsors. We keep it free, so it's uninterrupted information, but you can support us when you go to my website, veilofreality.com/membership and sign up for the membership and have access to over 140 podcast episodes of the second part. And there's a lot of stuff, even past episodes that are kind of timeless that will help you during these times and the times ahead. And with that being said, we'll be right back.